And good morning, everyone, and welcome to Emerald Ash Borer University. It's coming to you live from my office at Michigan State University and here in East Lansing. My name is Robin Usborne, and along with my colleagues Adam Witt from Purdue University and Amy Stone from Ohio State University, we hope you'll find this webinar informative. Clint McFarland is our presenter today. He is the Massachusetts Asian Longhorn Beetle Project Manager for the USDA APHIS. And he will be giving us some insight today on the U.S. regulatory system as it relates to the Asian longhorn beetle management efforts. He has worked for the USDA APHIS PPQ on the ALB program for the past 12 years. He started working in the boroughs of New York City, but came to Massachusetts when the infestation was identified in 2008. Prior to that, he worked on the Asian citrus psyllid, greening, and citrus crops in Florida. His interest lies in invasive insect species and interactions with our ecosystems. Now, if you have questions during the webinar, as you can see, please feel free to write them in the chat pod. We will make a note of them, and Clint will be responding to questions after the presentation to keep the flow of the webinar smooth. And please stay tuned until the end, because we would like to get your feedback, and we'll be providing a link to a survey that we'd like you to participate in. As well, for those of you needing CEUs, your survey information is necessary for us to process those CEUs. The first 10 people to participate will receive an EAB goodie bag, and even if you've received a goodie bag in the past, we appreciate your continued feedback on this webinar as well. This webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing this week at emeraldashborer.info. You will also find the recordings for all previous EAB University webinars there. Please give us your feedback about you as well. We always want to know what we can do to make these webinars better. Thank you for attending today, and with that, I'll bring up Clint's presentation and we will begin. All right, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Robin. Yep, really appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to you a little bit about Asian longhorn beetle today, and specifically what we are doing here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So with that today, I know I'm going to try to cover quite a bit. You're going to see that I could talk ad infinitum here. We won't do that to you today, and we'll leave some time at the end for questions. But I would like to cover a little bit of the beetle biology, specifically of Asian longhorn beetle, and then go into the damage and impact, sort of why the federal government is putting all this time, resources, money behind this in order to achieve or look at an eradication. And then I really want to look at the Massachusetts infestation, look at some of our program operations, specifically on our regulatory program, some of those things that we need to do, and then really look at to round this out, the cooperation, outreach, and engagement. That is not only with industry, that is with the community, that is with the media, that is with politicians, and sort of look at some of the lessons learned here and how we can continue moving forward. So with that, we're going to start on this image of the actual life cycle of the Asian longhorn beetle. In the center of this image, they are showing a tree in different seasons, just because this life cycle is going to take a prolonged amount of time. This is one of the things that lends itself to why Asian longhorn beetle, we can entertain eradication. We are looking at this life cycle from adult through its immature stages back around is going to take 1 to 2 years. That is going to depend on the latitude of the infestation and where you're at. Whether you're down outside of Bethel, outside of Cincinnati in Bethel, Ohio, that you're probably going to get looking at 1 year as we get up here, and then going up into Canada. As the latitude moves up, you're probably looking closer to 2 years, and a little bit of that is going to depend on when that egg was actually laid during the adult emergence season. So when we look at the adult beetle, rather showy, a large beetle. We think it's easily enough not mistaken for other things, but as we'll talk about here today, that's not always the case with people that don't deal with insects all the time. You're going to get these coming out here in Massachusetts around the 4th of July holiday is when the emergent season is going to start. You're going to get some maturation feeding on the veins and the shoots of the actual tree for about 10 days, and then they're going to chew oviposition pits, the females will, into the actual bark of the tree, and then oviposit their egg on the underneath side of the bark. It's about the size of a grain of rice. You're going to get one egg per site, and then you can see that it starts to go through its larval stages, its immature stages. With that, the early, you have 5 different instars. The first couple are going to be actually in the cambium layer of the tree, the vascular tissue, and then you're going to go into the sapwood and the heartwood of the tree. Obviously, you have different concerns there for living materials to pass through the tree, and then the structural integrity of the tree. It is a whole metabolist, so it's going to go through a complete metamorphosis, and you can see sort of H.J. Geiger's alien, and I sort of think it looks like that down in the corner for when it does go through pupation. You will be able to see in that image on the lower right as well some of the frass in that pupal chamber. The frass material, very, very distinctive for this insect. Can tell that versus a lot of other wood-boring insects solely by that frass. So we're going to go through some pictures now to show you even more, but the life cycle, rather prolonged for what we are seeing. This insect is a rather lackadaisical insect as well. Would rather lay all her eggs on one individual tree rather than moving on. The one problem that we saw up here in many areas we'll see is if you have an interwoven canopy, one tree is just like the next when these beetles are walking around. So really just wanted to go through some images that you do see of the beetle. The onyx coloration, that iridescent blue color that comes up near the base of the antenna and on the tarsal segments of the insect, rather large. When we're looking at the immatures in the lower right corner, those larvae can get up to 2 inches in length, and you can see what that would do to the structural integrity of a limb or a tree as this beetle is maturing. I'd like to show this picture of the beetle actually emerging. You look about a 3/8 of an inch size hole as they do come out. We also like to show this aluminum tag. The beetle doesn't know what's on the outside of the tree there, so we like to show this image as it will chew through. Often from residents, though, when we are speaking and doing outreach, they wonder then if they're aggressive. They are not, but of course are going to biologically try to survive and will emerge out. So they can feed through quite a bit. We know that they are feeding on woody material, on cellulose, so obviously their mandibles are quite strong. Some more pictures of mating. The female chewing an oviposition pit in the upper left corner, and then we do have some pictures of flight. These insects can fly, but are not readily going to fly. They really are clumsy and will really choose not to. Once again, going back with the prolonged development time, the lackadaisical behavior, some of the things that lend itself for eradication. So when we start to look at why, what we have. I know you guys have heard a lot about emerald ash borer and obviously worked a lot in your areas on that concern. Looking at the ash as far as a genus that you are looking through that is going to be affected. Here we have 13 different host genera right now in North America that are impacted and viable hosts for the Asian longhorn beetle. This is a big concern for the northeastern hardwood forest as a lot of these trees tie into industry, tie into tourism, indirectly the other costs, since these are the vibrant colors of the fall as well. So we're looking at maples, birches, willows, elms, horse chestnuts, and the list goes on from there. But there's a wide palette of material, so this does become quite a bit concerning for us as it can find refuge in quite a few different areas. I want to show some more pictures of damage before we move on here as well. On this limb, we can see quite a bit of oviposition pits. We can see where the arrow is pointing there, an oviposition pit that's a little more weathered. It's going to be from a previous year. And you can see the bruising, the orange coloration there of oviposition pits that are actually from the current year that this picture was taken. We can see sort of the zigzagging. That female will go up sort of in a Z pattern, back and forth. If you're seeing egg sites close to each other, that is from separate females. Also down from this arrow, you'll be able to see on this some of the bark giving way underneath here. You can see some frass in this area right here where I'm actually have the pointer right now. And then some of the galleries, C-shaped gallery where the insect actually went into the sapwood heartwood, but you'll see with nothing to keep this bark on, that bark is going to start coming off of the actual limb that is infested there. can see an older egg site. It's not always that you're going to see many egg sites all in a row. This one is around, and you can still see some of the serrations from the female's mandible around the side there, but not always showing this picture the easiest to pick out. Not always as obvious as that last photo. Here you can see some of the other signs that we do look at when we're out surveying in the field for damage, for infestation. You're going to see some of this frass material. It's very coarse, it's very stringy, falling out of the tree. During active feeding in the summer months, you're really going to see a lot of this coming out of the tree, coming out of these oviposition pits as it's moving through in its development. You can see a little of the weeping, the bleeding around the sap that's going to be coming out as well in this picture on the bottom. And those are other signs, as other insects will be attracted to that, bees, Lepidoptera, and other things will draw in, and it could just draw a surveyor's eyes to that. Here you're starting to see a tree being broken down by Asian longhorn beetle damage. You can see that the top has come off because the structural integrity of the tree was compromised. And here we're seeing a more heavily infested tree, as you can see all the emergence holes, absolutely perfect holes that are going to come out. We often say that you can use the eraser end of a pencil. It's going to go in there. This insect obviously is going to come out almost at a right angle with its body, its shape, its size. And so coming out, and this is what we start to see when trees become more heavily infested. So this is coming back.
Could you please just a little bit away from your mouth? It's I think there's
a little too close.
A little bit of feedback.
Okay, and I do have not.
Yeah.
I apologize, as I cannot whisper. Yes. And this was coming back to the first slides, and I'm not sure if I hit something there. My apologies. Maybe I'm stuck here now, Robin. Oop. And Robin, my apologies. I don't know if this new version I just loaded up has froze itself. Do we still have the other one behind here that we used yesterday?
It looks like your presentation got started again, like in the middle there. So I think if you keep on where you...
Yeah, it started again there, and then it's just becoming frozen a little bit. Oh, okay.
On some things.
And is it just a delay on my screen, or is this delaying on your screen as well?
No?
Seems to be going now. Alright, maybe there is a little bit of delay. I'm sorry, he was trying to get caught up. I think this is... And is it better on the sound now, Robin, if I'm a little further back here? Or are you still getting some of that feedback? Well, let's hope.
I think it's
let's
okay.
hope that is better there a little bit, and trying to push this away a little bit better. On this, we're just seeing a little bit more of the frass collecting up near the base of trees. When they're actively feeding, you can actually see this frass starting to accumulate almost like mulch at the base of the tree. This will be in crotches. This will be at the base of the tree, just another thing that can draw your eye. Once again, very coarse, very stringy, versus pine sawyers, versus other sawyers that we have. Carpenter ants, carpenter bees, you're going to see that there is a wide difference in this frass, and you can actually tell the difference between these different borers on that. Here, once again, just looking at oviposition sites, both new and old. And then we are also looking at some emergence holes. I want to point out on this picture, as this is very useful for us in how we look at the forensics and the age of an infestation. Right here, we're actually seeing a compartmentalized and sealed off emergence hole. Asian longhorn beetle does not kill a tree instantaneously. You're going to keep getting collateral damage as the infestation could move out and radiate out from this point, but you are seeing that this is an old emergence hole we have here. Why this is important is because with the tree still growing, we could look at in that emergence hole when the infestation actually got there. So we could start to look at the modeling of the infestation, and we'll look at that a little bit later for here in the Commonwealth, how quickly on its own, what things are other outliers that humans might have moved, but we can get a very good aging on when the infestation actually started from this tool. Just wanted to show on this slide, we have very close lookalikes that are out there. The white-spotted pine sawyer generally starts for its emergence season here in the Commonwealth around Memorial Day and comes out. You can see that versus the Asian longhorn beetle, and it is going to look very, very similar there as a longhorn beetle in its own right. We get a lot of calls on this. I'm going to round back to that at the end of the talk, but we really like the engagement. I would prefer to have people actually calling us about this and aware of the insects that are part of their ecosystem and what they're seeing, because those additional eyes, those citizen scientists are absolutely critical for us to have and can be very useful. All those extra eyes, very additional useful tool. So with that, I'm just going to transition a little bit to what we have to lose. Why would the government be putting in all this time, all this money, all these resources to try to eradicate? We talked about that there are 13 different host genera, so obviously the palette for the insect is quite large for what we have here and for the trees that we have surrounding us. But we also really look, I know I mentioned tourism before, here especially in New England, you've got people that come in from all over, especially in these fall months, to be the leaf peepers, to view the foliage that's out there. So service industries, a lot of different people's livelihoods are tied in directly to that. Then a big one we have are all the sugar bushes. The maple syrup industry is very, very concerned of this. We don't have any infestation currently within sugar bushes, but that is a very big concern as maples are the most preferred genus that we have seen for this insect. Then you've got so many people working in and around the timber industry, whether they are arborists, looking at saw logs, removals of trees. We also do have concerns with the nursery stock industry, both in Ohio and here in Massachusetts. We are actually with our regulated area right now on the border of a nursery that's been in business for the last 100 years, just past their 100-year mark last year. So they have very real concerns about the impact to them if their farm stand, if some of their in-ground yards are actually put into regulation, as a lot of that material will then be lost. So very, very real concerns there. Then if we take this and extrapolate out for what we really have to lose as far as our water quality, our air quality, as far as the services that these trees are providing, even as the carbon sink here in the northeastern hardwood forest, we look at a lot of things that have a huge impact on a great deal of us. So with that, a lot of funding, a lot of money has gone into this. I can state that right now for Massachusetts, for the last 5 years, we have spent $110 million on operations, and I will show you more specifically the strides, the progress we have made with that, but that is quite a commitment that has come and is behind us here. We talked a little bit earlier, and I'm not going to stay on this slide long, but that Asian longhorn beetle does not kill trees instantaneously, but it will kill a tree eventually. Death of that tree is going to occur. This is a red maple that was along almost the epicenter of the infestation here in the city of Worcester. It's an Armstrong variety of the red maple, but you can see that this tree was completely dead. All the bark had fallen off of it, and obviously the whole canopy had come down beside it as well. So we often speak because residents, they want to see that the tree is, if they still see green on it, it means the tree's still alive, it's vibrant, and we know that that is not always the case, so that is part of the education that we have to do here. I just real quickly want to hit on a couple of the research things, because this ties into looking at different innovations, looking at ways to be a little bit more savvy on our feet. How can we bring in some of these skills and expertise, the knowledge, the lessons learned that we've had to move forward, to become better, to become more efficient at what we're doing, and basically to get forest health and some of these concerns to move forward, for people to understand why, and then the commitment and how we can do it quickly and efficiently. We have been looking at a large, wide swath of things. So we certainly look at all our detection strategies, because survey informs everything for us, and survey is intensive. Whether that's individuals on the ground with binoculars, whether that's the men and women that actually do aerial surveys and climb these trees, that's all intensive. So we're looking at different ways to find the beetle, to get priority areas, to get hotspots. So with that, over the last couple of years, we've been looking at detector dogs, canines that we use at ports of entry, on drugs, on agricultural commodities. This is something we have found that they can actually differentiate the chemical component in the frass material from these insects. We've seen that through proficiencies. We've seen some in the field. Now it's just trying to see if we could find better ways to implement that in the field. Obviously, limitations there of a handler, of the dog getting tired, of overwhelmed. So some of those things still being looked at. Also in a combination with Worcester Polytechnic Institute that's here in town and some of academia, we're looking at the use of robotics. Can you actually have something go up into the tree, take pictures? Can you have an algorithm to look that over, to get that data back? I mean, that would limit the daylight hours that you would have to be out there, that our men and women can only go out into survey. Just would open up different possibilities. Obviously, looking at a lot of risk modeling now. We all know that there are a ton of regulatory concerns when you add the human element into any of these programs. So with that, we are looking at how can we prioritize those risk and likelihoods of different areas, whether they're transfer stations, firewood dealers, arborists where they're keeping their trucks. So we're looking at all of this to make sure that we're being as savvy as we possibly can. You obviously can't be everywhere all at once, so very, very important for us to start to take some of that in. You're going to see one of our traps here on the right. Lures and trapping is a very big thing we've been making a push on. We've actually gotten grants here on this program over the last couple of years from the Forest Service to put out 1,000 traps throughout the area outside of our programmatic funds. So this has been good to see that research continue, and also to have a commitment to allow that research to continue for the time being. Also looking at ALB host tree selection. This is key for us. How does the insect actually find its tree? How is it attracted to it? Those different elements are very important to us, and if we can get more of a handle on that, obviously can help all of our operations. Other than that, we do also look at control strategies, biological approaches, whether that's fungal bans, and a lot of work that's been going out of Cornell University for years, and looking at that possibility too, possibly parasitoids that are coming from native regions in China and Korea, but more so we've seen a burkhanid, another parasitoid local here on Cerambycids that might give us some control. So looking at those angles for possible augmentation and assistance. Chemical controls. When you look at where this insect is inside the tree and its development, we can use some systemic chemicals, but it's not going to be a curative. It is going to be a prophylactic. So with that, we can do some treatments. Right now, we've only been able to do those in the spring, so we're looking at can we get effective residual for the next emergent season on fall treatments. Then we also want to look at some of the population dynamics and modeling. This goes in with the haplotypes, the DNA analysis, going more to the importer-exporter, geographic regions. Maybe we could limit some of that coming in with our phytosanitary measures, but also can we look at more of the predator-prey relationships that exist there. Going to come back to the aging of the infestation. We talked about that earlier with the compartmentalizing and sealing off of emergence holes. And then you have a real need for industry. We're regulators, but with regulatory treatments. Can we find something that can help out the nursery industry? Can we find other ways outside of kiln drying for firewood to be able to move around? They're currently looking at radio frequency and different types of methodology that might be able to work on that. And then saw logs as well, but some of the things that industry just will need help with. This image here is showing how we can look at those sealed and compartmentalized off emergence holes. Obviously important for us to be able to age the infestation, but you can see here after we take these cookies, we sand down that actual cookie, we can look and very comprehensively see when that actual emergence hole went in or when they came out, and then you can backtrack that knowing the development time of the insect to when it got there. Obviously very, very important for our modeling and as we move out and to limit the infestation, which we're currently doing. This is a map of North America for the different infestations we have of Asian longhorn beetle. Highlighted our two newest ones there in Ohio and in Massachusetts. more the areas of concern because they're outside of urban centers right now. If you have other questions on the different other ones that have been eradicated or what is happening there in Canada, we can ask those at the end. The other thing I wanted to point out about this map, although it is just showing the United States in the orangish color on here, this is going to continue through Canada all the way up to the boreal line, but that orangish color is solely the maple forest that does exist here. So that color is showing solely maple, where we are with these infestations, and really the impact of what we have to lose. So now I'd like to go into the actual Massachusetts infestation and what we're doing here. 5 years ago, we just passed our 5-year anniversary for operations here in the Commonwealth. It was August 5th, 2008. It was found in the Greendale and Burncoat neighborhoods of Worcester, and it was estimated to be at least 12 to 15 years old at that time. I think that when we look at these infestations, we're looking at them coming back to the late 80s, early 90s, the global economy coming up. Obviously, goods were moving all around, and I think that's where it went back to. So when we got here, this could have been as old as 20 years old on this infestation. We have 110 square miles that are regulated here in central Massachusetts around this infestation. You have many different municipalities that are in this, but this is our 110 square mile area right now. Everything that we do is identified by surveys. I mentioned some of the research items because we constantly have to look for better ways. All our control strategies are informed by surveys. So with that, men and women on the ground, men and women climbing the trees, you can look at those number of trees that we have surveyed. So here in 5 years, and this number is a little outdated, we are just shy of 4 million susceptible host trees being surveyed here in central Massachusetts since we've arrived. So this is obviously not a small undertaking, this is a large undertaking. With the number of staff from the state and the federal side, plus contractors right now, we have about 240 individuals out there surveying on any given day. So it is a large operation, and obviously a lot that we have to do here. This map here is showing the actual infested tree points. This is in the last 5 years of what we have. You can see in the center of the map, the epicenter of the infestation. With these points listed here, we have about 32,000 public shade trees and landscape trees that were removed. You can see as part of the delimitation, we are heading out. Still areas to be surveyed in white that you are seeing on this map, with the gray being just outside of that, but this is a moving target right now. Obviously, still have a lot of unknowns as we are moving out in delimitation. So trees removals started almost immediately after we got here in 2008, started to identify the infestation, obviously had a need to excise out that population. It was a necessity to move rather quickly on that. Here you can see some of the crane work, as a lot of this removal work was done by cranes. Moving out, and in the very beginning we had 18 cranes operating at once, trying to get down the bulk of that before emergent season in that winter of 2009. So you could see that it was quite a show in many regards. On the upper right you could see it was a tree-lined street. Because we were working very efficiently and methodically, neighbors would go to work, come back to see that all trees had been removed. So it was very impactful, obviously an emotional time for a lot of the residents here in central Massachusetts. Really, and I know that this has been preached around through all forest health, but a monoculture of maple species. Norway maples were planted after a tornado they had in the 50s here in the city of Worcester, all planted the same, all the same age. Really gave carte blanche for this insect to move directly through. They had already seen a lot of different things here in New England, from chestnut blight to Dutch elm disease, now emerald ash borer on the horizon and being found here in the Commonwealth as well. Just a lot of different things of why we want to get to right tree, right place, and diversification of the urban canopy. So that's been a lot of our messaging as well. Just more here, you can see trees that are dead from Asian longhorn beetle, that they were taken out, but eventually it will kill the tree. Here I also wanted to mention that, and this goes into how we have to conduct our operations, we are outside of urban centers at this point. Urban centers I take as Toronto, Chicago, New York City, very, very metropolitan, the concrete jungle. Here, populations are less, although you do have a city in New England. The population here in Worcester is only 180,000 individuals. So a lot of areas as we move out are heavily, heavily forested, which has always been the concern for us. We showed on an earlier slide there the 32,000 public shade and landscape trees that were removed. Those were individual trees removed by cranes. We also have had a need to do precision complete host removals, more forestry removals on parcels to make sure that we really are doing ourselves a favor and progressing forward efficiently and not taking any chances. So on the polygons on this map, what you are seeing are acres where complete host removal, all 13 host genera that are susceptible were removed from these areas. It's not a clear cut. It's not that everything was taken out. Pine, oak, anything that's non-susceptible was left, but we did do forestry removals. This equates to about 1,400 acres that you are seeing on this map. Not taken lightly on doing this kind of work, but absolutely used as a tool and will continue to be used. This picture you can see how some of that looks directly after a cut and some of the equipment. We are using forestry equipment. We are putting swamp mats down. We are using harvesters, forwarders, skidders to move this material out and do what we have to do, but 1,400 acres additionally on top of the other 32,000 individual trees we looked at. That's more operational. I do want to now go before we finish up into our regulatory component, which is huge for us here, and then a little bit more so into the engagement and how we make these things run, how it has to happen with our engagement and with our cooperators. So we are obviously in APHIS a regulatory agency for what I work in PPQ. We come in here in order to assist industry to make sure that this insect isn't going to decimate industry. With that, I think we all know that regulations do not work if industry does not buy in. It's got to be for them. They've got to realize the merit behind it of what it has to deal with them in order for them to comply. It's obviously a line I think a lot of us walk on and try to bridge every single day. Everything from these 13 host genera, whether it's propagated material or anything else, is regulated by us in the area. This is something that we need to make sure that people are aware they cannot move. We see on the natural dispersal of this insect that it's only going to move about 300 meters a year on its own, and that would be at max. We do see some environmental wind patterns and everything will assist in that, but really this insect is a homebody and it really doesn't move on all that far on its own. But we've mentioned with firewood, we've mentioned with other things, the human component is really what can send it and drive it to, we can send it anywhere overnight. We really can. And that's the problem. It can be up in Maine, it can be up in New Hampshire. We know people are very, very chivalrous about things and wanting to give this wood away. A lot of people use their wood stoves for heating. So a very, very real issue here for what the commodity is used for. Here on the left, you can see some very heavily infested pieces of wood that have been cut up. This material was seized, but obviously not what we want to see. And even what gives me more consternation and heart palpitations is the sign on the right. Free wood, no beetles. People actually certifying wood and thinking that it's all right to go, even when they've been made aware of what we are doing here and why. We do have a disposal yard set up in the area where we will take all material outside of brush from any of these companies that are working in the regulated area. We just want to make sure it's disposed of correctly, so we do take on that cost. We will take stump material. We will take anything and process it that is in the regulated area. We want industry to have that out. We don't want them to have to incur additional costs. We really want to make sure it's disposed of in the appropriate way at our site, which has been the very big thing. We comb over Craigslist. We work with our environmental police officers here in the Commonwealth that have jurisdiction to pull over commercial and private vehicles. We do evening patrols. We do weekend blitzes at points. Because we can pull over people, we have to make sure they're aware. We can't have any of this free wood, no beetles going on. where people think they can move it, where they think they can certify this stuff. I mean, the concern is too real for all of us that that just cannot occur. We do allow individuals, if there still is bark on the firewood pieces and different things, to move it out. We don't want to regulate non-host. A lot of us can tell. If it's going down to the grain of wood, you can still do that at times, but if we can't tell, we will take it. If we ultimately can, we will work with industry. That's one thing that I think helps us get the buy-in of an understanding of what has to occur. Wood chips here on this program, we use to incinerate everything, all material. We have found out that that is not necessary. As long as we're getting down to less than 1 inch in 2 dimensions, I believe EAB does the same regulation, then that is going to be deregulated. That has helped out our program here in that this material, a lot of the biomass we've generated can go to cogeneration plants and can also go to mulching companies. We have found, and a lot of people ask, I know there's a lot of perception about the beetle getting out about this, through this material. That's not going to be the case. We know biologically the heat, the desiccation around the chip pile, that it's just not going to occur, but more so we find it's from the G-forces going through the chipper that actually will bring the mortality of the insect. We often get asked non-regulated materials, leaves, twigs, branches, grass clippings, the wood chips, all that is non-regulated. We obviously have to work a lot with industry so they are aware of what's going on. I know we mentioned firewood. I have it up here again. It's a big thing for us. We work with industry to give compliance agreements to everybody. I think it's ultimately important that they know the rules. We send out letters. We blitz with emails. We will make phone calls. I think it is absolutely essential that we have a constant dialogue with industry. That's the only way we're going to hear back their concerns and what they need from us, but also a way for us just to have that dialogue. I have found that it has been better if we're not coming on when there's a major issue or a change, if we have periodic dialogue, that conversation continues to occur, and then they will even call us to report things that are going on in the field or are suspicious. I mean, that's really where we want to get to, is that they can be additional eyes for us out there. We have seized quite a bit of firewood here within the regulated area. What we tell people, though, if it doesn't move, if we know that it's not infested, that they can keep it here. So that's another thing where we work with the residents, with the municipalities, with industry. Of course, we don't want it moving, and we will not hesitate to seize that, but obviously important that we are working with people. Understandably, when you see cords and cords of wood stacked up, we know the time and the effort that went into splitting that, and it's not the easiest when you do have to seize that after all that work has been done, since we don't offer any compensation or any kind of exchange program for that. Before I go into this last section and we get into questions, I do want to mention on the regulatory aspect, it is key for us to stay up with all of our agencies, partners that are in surrounding states here in New England that also have a concern about this. We work very closely. We want to make sure they're up to date with information, with what's going on, the newest things on research items that they can use, trapping, but also with this on firewood, a very big thing of making sure firewood isn't coming in from other areas. Hunting and fishing cabins occur all throughout New England, and a lot of people visit and they're traveling. We have set up at the state borders for confiscation of firewood exchanges. Maine was doing that last year, of cutting out any outside firewood coming into the park systems in these different areas. So really trying to be mindful with the whole message of buy local, burn local. We know that doesn't always occur, but really that education leads to a better awareness. We have seen, and I was surprised here in Massachusetts, getting out some of that message that individuals will actually give us a call to say their neighbor's moving firewood, or another individual out there that they see that they knew was doing work. Are they in compliance? That they were actually called to vet that out. I think that's a big testament to actually getting out there and letting people see they are part of the process. They really are an essential cog out there for us, because there are many additional eyes and ears, and we can't get enough of them that are out there. We just can't get enough. So on this last section, and this sort of ties into how we do our work, how this is a possibility. We've had a lot of stumbling points, and any of these programs will, as they get off the ground. You have to make people aware. You have to be extraordinarily empathetic to what's going on. Sometimes you even have to wear a beetle costume, as we're seeing here, to get out there. You can never do enough. When we look at all these photos, and I've been doing this at a few different talks recently, I ask individuals to look at these and tell me what their feelings. What do you see? Sort of those questions that we have on the bottom. Progress, necessity, devastation, rebuilding. What do we see when we take a look at these different photos? And the point I like to bring up here is that everybody's going to have their own perspective. They're really going to see it from their own angle. And if we can really get to a change in perspective, then that really changes everything. We can really get past, if we are open and listening to people's concerns, we're having that dialogue, but we all are going to see things a little bit differently. On this map, I like to send out and ask, this is just a map of land use that we are seeing here in Worcester County. And once again, asking that question of, what do you see when you look at this map? Do you see a bunch of pink? Do you see green? Do you see watershed land? Do you see residential land? Do you see forested land? All this is going to bring into our perspective on how we are viewing the problem, the dilemma of the situation, how we're going to see how best to get out of that. But if we can come together and sort of realize that we're all coming from different points, this has definitely helped us up here in Massachusetts, and I think it can help us all working with forest health issues. So with that, just in the beginning, building a solid foundation. I found here in the beginning that tirelessly we would go out in the evenings to open ourselves up to any homeowner, to any resident, to any community groups. We would go back out there night after night. A lot of that we did encounter vitriol, we encountered anger. This is a very emotional thing when you're going to remove people's trees from their properties. But that ultimately leads to the empathy, but also leads to you're willing to have that conversation. You're willing to have that dialogue. You're willing to be understanding to that point that you will do it this evening with them, and you'll come back again if they have not finished the very next evening. I know it's not the most exciting of work to do at times, but it's absolutely essential, I think, to win people over, because that will permeate into the media, as we've seen. That will also permeate over into the politicians that listen to their constituents and are obviously looking for the votes to stay in their positions of power. So just on operations here, listed some things of knowing what we have to do, but really the more important side of this slide is the stakeholders. For earning that respect, of sharing that, being clear. Really the transparency we have seen is absolutely essential. There's no need to hide what we're doing. If we can educate and make them more aware, they become empowered and they can actually see what we all have to lose, and it becomes very personal to them. So we know that we are a regulatory agency. We've obviously got to come in to do work. We've got to set up federal orders. We've got to set up state orders. We've been talking to the surrounding states here about setting that up beforehand. You need to make sure you've got legislation on the books in order to do that. If we could do that more proactively up front, that helps all of us. We found when we came here to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that they had a $25 fine for any forest, pest, or health issues per incident. $25 does not incentivize, is not much incentive for individuals to comply with regulations. We worked with the state legislature here and got that up to $25,000 per, on interpretation, could be per piece of firewood. So obviously it gives us a lot more. We have put out fines and penalties. We've revoked compliance agreements from companies. I think you really need to show that you have teeth on these things and you can enforce your regulations. Oftentimes those fees, fines, penalties get mitigated down, but when you're starting from a much higher number, it makes it much more serious and helps us because that word spreads. The word of mouth spreads very, very quickly after you start to pull some people over and get some violations. I know this has hit a little bit, once again talking about the industry that we're impacting, who's important, developers, landscapers, arborists, loggers, firewood dealers, but then getting out into the community. Really our impacts go out to dissemination of information, municipal programs, trash collection, movement of firewood. like to show this map of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts because this is a count of all the calls, I call these service calls, that have come in from across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. This first map only represents, the visual of the map only represents the very first year that we were here, 2008 into 2009. It bleeds over the calendar years, but our first year that we were actually here, August to August, in operations. Why I like to show this is because if you can engage the community, you can see that calls will come in. This is about suspicious insects. This is about suspicious damage on trees. We will go out and meet with each and every one of these property owners, survey a certain segment of their property, and also start to educate them on what they're seeing. I was telling Robin leading up to this talk that in the very beginning we were getting people, and we still do, calling to say 110% they've got Asian longhorn beetle, only to arrive out to see that they have gotten an ant or a bee or something else. But we love that they're at least starting to look at insects, that they are starting to educate themselves about what is around them and what should be there. We just like to have that dialogue. None of these other spots where we went out to look panned out to anything, but we love to see that you get that engagement. The other thing I like to point out from this is our total number. You can see how we were rising up towards 2010, obviously a big push on outreach and our awareness campaigns, but then you can see that that number has dropped. That number has come off. People become complacent. What we have found is you can never stop pressing on that public outreach, that awareness engagement component. We have to realize that they really are our critical stakeholders. They are the ones we're serving, but we also, if we don't engage them, they will forget. We even had examples of removing trees off one property. The next door neighbor said, oh, I thought that problem with Asian longhorn beetle was gone, when we were actively removing trees from his neighbor's property. So even if it's right in front of your face, we see that you have to keep finding ways, different ways, innovative ways to get out to the public, to engage them. We do a lot of campaigns, from bus signage to PSAs on computers, internet advertisements to billboards, a ton of different things, but sort of can never stop on looking at different ways to get out to the public. They can be critical, a huge asset, but they can also, if they're not engaged, be a lost tool. This one I just like to throw up, and won't stay much on it, but that there's stakeholders, that I want us all to look at who is a stakeholder, because once you start to think about it, almost everybody that you interact with is going to be a stakeholder in one way or another. And one big thing I've come on this past year here for all of us is that our employees, the people that actually work for us as well, are a critical stakeholder, and I think that that gets lost at times, that they need to be engaged in the same manner as what we're looking at. So before, as we're wrapping up here, just fostering these critical relationships. I can say from all our lessons learned going back, we're in a very good place here now. As I said, with the local politicians have bought in and actually give us support. It wasn't always that way, but getting to that point was critical. Sort of looking back now, I can see that that transparency, being readily available, being clear, actually having consistency on the messaging was absolutely essential. And that's with everybody from industry on through. If you can stay to that, it's not always the easiest. You will take a lot of punishment, quite frankly, from it at times, but it's absolutely essential to make these things work, and to work on the startup as quickly as they possibly can. So this is just some pictures of outreach as an invaluable tool and some of the things we do. I'm going to skip by this in lieu of time and just say that eradication, we know that it is possible. We've done a lot of things here for Asian longhorn beetle. We continue to get more efficient and more savvy at what we're doing. We spoke about the lackadaisical behavior, the development cycle. It's been proven in other areas. Chicago, Illinois has been eradicated. New Jersey this past year. The boroughs of Manhattan and Staten Island were also taken off. Toronto was taken off earlier this year as well. Unfortunately, they did find a beetle 6 months after the fact, but that right now from surveys is isolated to 6 infested properties. We'll see what comes of that. That just was recent prior to the furlough. We are finding the edges of our infestation here as we move out. Instead of 20 years being infested, we're seeing things infested in the last couple years. Obviously, reduced population. We only found 19 beetles this past year versus the thousands that were in the area back in 2008. And the second from the bottom bullet, the more citizen scientists every day. We've been talking about that. Engaging people is absolutely essential. To wrap up here before we go to questions, I did want to bring up our success story here. This, if people are not aware, is the infestation we found in the city of Boston. Our infestation here was made known to us in 2008. In 2010, from outreach, the facilities manager at Faulkner Hospital, that is on Center Street here in the city of Boston, is in this location, found that around her visitor's parking lot there were suspicious trees. We did find that 6 were infested with Asian longhorn beetle. Directly across the street here from that infestation, this area right here is the Arnold Arboretum. So part of Harvard University. Olmsted had done this back in the day, a large collection of very important accession trees, collections here from across the world, but even Miles Standish's engagement tree, so going back to American history, are part of this collection in here. We found those 6 trees back in 2010. We found the 2 beetles on that same 4th of July weekend that emerged out of that tree, so we would have only had some emergence in 2009. This all speaks to the things we've been talking about today, but we have surveyed over 100,000 trees out from that radius since 2010 in the last 3 years and have found nothing else. No infestation has been found in the Arnold Arboretum, no other infested trees in this whole 10 square mile regulated area. Early detection is key. Education, outreach, awareness is key. Sort of all these came in on the perfect storm, and we are looking at an eradication ceremony for the city of Boston early next calendar year. We've already done our chemical treatments, we've climbed, we've surveyed. I think here we're showing a microcosm of an example of what we really can do, how can all work coming together, but the success story that we like to speak about in that Boston is going to come off. It's going to come off quicker than we've ever done things in the past, but really a testament on many different levels. And I know that I can, as I said, talk, but I like to throw up this very scary looking beetle here for any questions that you do have, and appreciate your time here today.
Thank you, Clint. I have a question. Since you also, you're there with APHIS, do you see a greater focus on inspection of imported products at the borders for wood, like wood boring insects and that kind of thing, since we seem to be seeing more of them?
We are seeing some of that, and we made a big press. I know that we at times get, we have PPD within APHIS, which is our program and policy review team. They just came and looked at ALB again. I think it's good that we look at these things periodically, but that was one big push, Robin, that we asked for. You can't do any of this work if the back door is open. Obviously, it's a moot point at that time. So we are looking at more ways to use the CAPS program in many different states, because we can look at this more from a risk and likelihood factor of what we have there. We can obviously be a lot more savvy. We've been doing a lot more risk modeling to looking at where different things are located. That comes in from the ports, making sure people are looking at the ISPM 15 and adhering to that, but also goods and commodities. I think that with the genetic materials, well, instead of looking at China and Korea as countries of origin, we can go back to importers, exporters now with those haplotypes, be a lot more savvy on where things are coming out, because we don't have to go after a whole country. We can look at those specific importers and exporters if we have been having problems. That's identified from our ports of entry going back, but I think that we can look at a lot of these different tools, certainly on the radar, though, and looking at many things to help us there. Traps can help out with that, the CAPS program, but also working with Homeland Security and, frankly, stuff coming in through the ports.
Thank you. Looks like we've got a couple more questions there.
Okay. This is a good question. I will take that first one there. This is asking, when trees must be eradicated from private property, does the Commonwealth or federal government help with planting replacement trees? Here we got a big commitment, obviously, and I didn't hit on that today, looking at more of the regulatory aspect, but we can't do a program like this at this kind of level for how many trees were removed, how quickly, without some kind of replanting component to come back in. We need to do that Speaking a little earlier, I spoke about we like to talk about the right tree, right place, the benefits of trees, sort of get more in that dialogue for people on what trees mean to them, but also the diversification and understanding. We as APHIS, since we are a regulatory agency looking at solely eradication, we do not have the authority to give money and replant replacement trees. I think we could get into a really sticky wicket with that, with how many trees have been taken down with citrus in Florida, different growers. You can get into astronomical costs. Having said that, we are very close to having replanted 30,000 trees since we have been here. I think we'll hit the 30,000 tree mark next spring in our planting season. With that, monies came from, some did come from APHIS. We generally don't do that. Some did come from APHIS in a small component. That has to be fed through the United States Forest Service, as they do have the authority to give that grant money out to all states, entities in order to replant. The Commonwealth here did come up with several $million of their own, realizing that this was a necessity, so money came from that, and actually we lucked out with the majority of our 30,000 trees and money coming from the ARA program, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. At the beginning of our program, that stimulus money was coming around, offered us an opportunity to hire 60 local individuals, seasonals, to actually plant trees, but $5 million, most of that went to replanting against forest fires in the West, but we actually did get federal dollars through that. The Forest Service lobbied for that. Having some connections and partnerships allowed that to happen, but that was $4.5 million that did come in at the onset. So I guess it is a mixture, although we do not have authority for that. Looking at that, we've had about $8 million come back in. That's on top of the 110 I mentioned operationally for solely replanting operations. So quite large. The next question there is, do you know what the eradication status of ALB in the Cincinnati area is? Yes, that's in Bethel. It's about 35 miles southeast, heading down towards the border there with Kentucky. With that, they are growing. They've had about 6,000 infested trees. Some of those, if you're familiar with the area, in East Forks State Park, where they're actually starting to do some forestry removal, some of the acreage removals that I mentioned earlier here. They're actually starting up. They are, in 2 years since the infestation has been found, they still are in a tough spot as far as with the community, with buy-in. Anytime we enter into any of these different areas, it takes a lot to educate. It takes a lot for people to come to the understanding that the trees are going to be removed, and we've got to be ultimately empathetic to that. One thing that has occurred with Ohio, in addition to this, is the day and age we live in with social media. Things go back and forth almost instantaneously. And with that, we just need to be mindful of our consistency of messaging, not only here in Massachusetts to the residents, but knowing that that information is going to go immediately to Ohio, or immediately down to New York or other active programs. We ultimately need to make sure we are consistent. They are still trying to delimit. They're very early in the process out there in Ohio. Have found, as I said, a good amount of trees. We here in Massachusetts are the largest infestation in North America as far as numbers of trees and the level of infestation we saw in those trees, but Ohio is still an unknown. We just don't know. It wasn't as old as this infestation in Massachusetts when found, but still rather substantial, and wood and firewood, a commodity readily used in that area as well. That's the last question I see there. I don't know if anybody else has any questions.
Clint, I was wondering, when you're talking about your outreach, and that's what we learned also with Emerald Ash Borer, how important it is to kind of get out there and talk to people one-on-one, even though it's kind of a labor-intensive kind of thing, but it seems to be pretty, it seems to be pretty important and worthwhile. Did you, by any chance, also have any help with that through like the extension services there in Massachusetts, or also the Master Gardener volunteers?
We tied into all those programs almost immediately. After I saw that it was going to be difficult in the beginning, The Master Gardener Clubs, they've even set up arboretums now of non-host trees to plant, and have sort of bought into that education component to help people out to have a context and understanding. Going out to extension services, we did, especially here with UMass, had a big component. They've got a big forestry program, not only to entice and bring in good candidates to work with us, but also to get that message out. Bob Childs is one of the main state entomologists that works through extension here in the Commonwealth, and obviously needed to attach to him rather quickly and make sure that we were on the same page, and we were giving him full access to what we were doing so that context could be there as well. I even found that with NRCS, the Conservation Research Service, any local entities, the land trusts that are out there, any of these kind of groups. We also have the Mass Foresters and Land Tree Wardens and Foresters Association, Mass Arborists Association. I mean, any of these affiliations, academia, going to Harvard Forest, as they have a lot of different research going on in the area. Anybody and sort of everybody that it touches on, we tried to get early, because then if they're spreading the word and you've got them doing some on their own and realizing the importance, it just helped to disseminate information a lot quicker. I know it's tedious. I know that it's difficult to get out there, but when you can start to grab that whole sort of web of players from the onset, I really found that it has helped us immensely, because then someone knows somebody else, and that helped with the politicians that didn't understand in the beginning, and you're an easy target. You really are an easy target, and standing there and taking it all the time is not the easiest, but certainly what we have to do, and we did not limit ourselves, Robin, there in any capacity. Is imidacloprid still being used? Yes, imidacloprid is still being used as the one systemic chemical that we have found that will give us the residual levels we need throughout the adult emergence season. Here in the Commonwealth, they had concerns because of well water and being so close. When we look back at the map there to the Wachusett Reservoir that leads and is the water source for the city of Boston, with the riparian areas and also with well water, some concerns. So we have not been doing any basal soil injection treatments. Everything has been a pressurized trunk injection there at the root flares of the tree to try to get in and just minimize the impact environmentally to that. We do a lot of environmental monitoring around soil, leaf litter, composting, some of these different things and angles where it could come into play with people to make sure we're not adversely affecting anything else. But right now, imidacloprid is still being used. It's the one. We are looking into other chemicals now as well, because we know that imidacloprid is being reviewed across the globe. There's been some seed treatments halting in the European Union, a couple European Union nations, and with that, I'm certain that the EPA is going to be reviewing that sometime on the near horizon as well. So, is stump tissue viable overwintering areas for this pest? How are stump removals being handled? Stump tissue, if it is alive, if you got your epicormic shoots, if you still got moisture content in that, it still could be viable. What we really have seen is an insect's not going to go after that stump. It really is not. It's the exception. It's going to be a rarity. If you have stump or even down near the root flare that is infested, it's generally because the whole tree is infested and you've got that level of infestation on the tree. They're generally just not going to go after that. What we see here versus other urban areas is we used to think that they only went after stressed trees. Obviously, physiology trees in urban centers are often all stressed for many different reasons. But we have seen here now that they go after, why go after a stressed tree if you've got a very healthy, lovely tree right next to it? So we see that they really will not go after that stump, that with the amount of host material density that we have, that they're really not going to go there. So it's not the biggest concern to us. Stump removals are handled in the acreage areas. They are left for erosion, for other concerns there. We don't want to take everything out, and it's really not that big of a concern for them becoming infested. That goes back into some of the regeneration, regrowth. We're just looking at buying time. The stumps on private property, though, we handle differently. That's a little different. You don't want to leave that on somebody's private property, obviously a little more concerning. So there we will grind the stump down to 8-9 inches below grade, We will bring back in loam and seed, and then we will start the conversation with them while the forester go out to speak about replanting options and what they can do and what kind of benefits they want to see from that.
Thanks, Clint. Is there any other questions? I think we're getting a little close on time here, but I'm sure if you would like to email Clint, then you could probably get some questions answered if you think of something
Please.
afterwards. You know, Clint, I have one question. Working with EAB for all this, I've been thinking, what is it probably that you see as one of the most difficult issues to address as far as being able to manage something like ALB? The whole firewood problem probably is the big one with emerald ash borer, because it's not a regulated industry. So I'm just kind of wondering if you have, you know, what you see as one of your biggest, you know, obstacles.
I think a large obstacle is why do this? I mean, we can go some of those tangible reasons of industries impacted to some of the environmental factors that are going to come in, but I sort of think in my own head, and I know I truly believe in the mission and what we can do, but is this the right move? What about the resiliency of forests? How will this impact them? Is it really that great? Sort of how will we be judged in history down the line? I sort of take that the outreach, the awareness, sort of getting into a dialogue, becoming more aware of the ecosystems we live in and some of the impacts, the ramifications that we do have is a bigger thing than knowing how all this will come out. That buy-in for people, I think, is a big thing. Maybe I'm nesting all that in together, but from the industry side of really learning that they're not going to adhere to things if they can't understand why it means something to them, and learning different ways to approach that dialogue and get through to people on what's something that actually hits them, but also then just with the community. I think you hit it before, not exhausting anybody you're going out to, not limiting yourself to any capacity to sort of sit on that throne or whatever to say, we dictate, always looking for different ways to do that, getting different input from different individuals, because that's the only way that you're going to sort of make it to turn over with the community, that they actually support what you're doing. I look back in hindsight and wish we could have done a little bit more of that. I know we were tirelessly working, but I guess I can look back and see that you could do more of that in the beginning. I guess more even there, Robin, of talking earlier about the state legislature setting up laws and becoming more ready for when these things happen rather than reactive. Also setting up some of those cooperators, those relationships with the extension, with academia, with other land trusts, to environmental groups, to any of these different organizations. I think having that beforehand always helps us in these kind of scenarios, and I think that a little bit more of that can always go a long way. I guess I can't keep coming back to that in this talk, is that you cannot do enough of that, and I can't see ever backing off. I can only see continuing to push that.
Thank you very much. I mean, I appreciate you know, you giving this overview and kind of giving us an update on what's going on, and how it's nice to see that ALB is, you know, there is a possibility of eradication, because emerald ash borer, of course, is getting a little bit depressing.
Yes.
But if I wanted to tell people, we will be, this webinar is being recorded. And in case you know of colleagues that missed it, we will get this recorded webinar posted on the eab.info website. And I hope folks who were not able to participate can do that at their leisure after it's posted. So with that, I'm going to close the meeting here in just a couple minutes. If you have some questions or comments, just feel free to type it. So I'm going to say at 11 past the hour, I'm going to close the meeting. But until then, thanks again, Clint, and everyone have a good day and stay warm.
Thank you. Thanks.